Here we go. It's time for my annual winter outlook 2025-2026. A lot of time has gone into this, looking at a lot of things, and I want to show you some of those things before we actually get into the winter outlook. These are just some of the things I look at. A lot of these just have these letters, and we'll go over some of these as we talk about the things that are impacted for our weather. La Niña, I'm going to explain that one a little bit. This QBO, it has to do with the upper level winds up in the stratosphere, and right now it is negative in the east direction. When that happens, we tend to see some colder weather in this part of the country in the winter. And this thing called the PDO, which I'll explain, has to do with the Pacific Ocean. It's very negative, about as negative as we have ever seen, and that also tends to lead sometimes to some colder weather in this part of the country in the winter. So right here, this is the first thing we're going to talk about. This is called La Niña. When you have cooler than normal sea surface temperatures near the equator here in the Pacific, that's called La Niña. But what causes it and how can it impact our weather? Well, the trade winds down here, what happens is these trade winds are blowing in this direction back to the west. It causes some of that cooler water underneath to upwell, we call it, or come up to the surface. And this can actually impact the way the jet stream pattern works. So for us in a La Niña winter, we tend to have the flow from the north. We tend to see a bit colder. We have these clipper systems, and many times it can be wetter than normal. So that's how a La Niña can impact our weather. In addition to La Niña, I also look out here in the Indian Ocean. Where is it warmer? Where is it colder? I talked about the PDO. Well, that is up here. We have cooler here, and warm in between. Again, many times when we see a setup like that, we tend to see a bit of a colder pattern here in the eastern part of the country. And then we also look in the Atlantic and in the Gulf of Mexico to see what the temperatures look like there. I also look to the north to see where the snow cover is and how thick it is. When air masses come down over this pack of snow cover and move south, if we have a lot of snowpack up there, the air masses don't get modified too much and they're pretty cold. Right now we have a pretty good snowpack, although not as much as we have had in the past. I look at a lot of things and I come up with what I call my analog years. Years I think are similar. I have 11 of them this year. The ones highlighted in red are my top analog years. Last year, and if you remember, we did have one big snowstorm in early January. 17-18, 13-14 was a tough winter. A lot of snow, a lot of cold. And this one also is one of my top analogs. And by the way, December of 2000, coldest December ever on record. 3 of the 4 of my highlighted ones, by the way, were colder than normal. So here's the outlook then for this winter. I think a quick start to winter, by that I'm talking about, we're going to jump right into this in the early part of December. I think the coldest winter we've seen here in about a decade, since 14-15, and I think the most snow we've seen here since 14-15. So if you're a winter lover, I think this is probably going to be the best winter for you that we've seen in a decade with the temperatures and with the snowfall. I'm going to use this phrase, I think, a lot in December. I've never used this before in a winter outlook, but I think it's going to be a December to remember. I think we're going to have some very active weather in December. Could be anything from severe thunderstorms to ice or snowstorms. So I think December going to pack a punch here in the Wabash Valley. The next measurable snow, because we already got one on November 10, will fall quickly. Easily by the 10th of December, I think we'll have the next measurable snow. Now, I don't think there's going to be a white Christmas because I think the pattern may relax right around Christmas to where it warms some. But I can tell you if I'm going to miss one, this one I could easily miss this year because December is going to be active. So I'm saying no white Christmas, but it wouldn't shock me I could miss that one. A lot of windy days. These clippers come in. We'll have a lot of wind again this winter and big temperature swings. I think at least 65 degrees from the coldest to the warmest temperature. So we're going to see a variation with these temperatures. And when that happens, when I looked at the analog years, I think we'll see at least one or maybe a couple record or near record highs. So when it warms, it could be a substantial warm up, which could also lead to possibly some severe weather. When it gets cold, though, I'm thinking 2 to 3 days will go below zero at least. 4 is average, so we will see some sub-zero temperatures. With the temperature swings, a couple of severe weather events will be possible. One of those very easily could be in the month of December with that wild pattern that we're looking at. This one, like last year, I think we could see at least one snow of 4.5 inches or greater. Most of those analog years had a sizable snowstorm, so I think we could get a decent, at least one snowstorm out of this pattern. The coldest will be in the first half of the winter. I think once we hit mid to late January, we'll kind of come out and the pattern will actually relax a little bit. This was interesting. Many of my analogs showed ice events. So I think ice is going to be likely, possibly even an ice storm. That's something we got to keep an eye on because many of those past years I looked at did have an ice issue. December, I think, will be the coldest month of the 3, December, January, and February. But I still think there's going to be some cold left over in March. And I think there's going to be some snow in March. So I don't think it'll be a quick start to spring this year. So here we go. Forecast temperatures. I'm forecasting 30.8, 32.3 is normal, so colder than normal, but not by a whole lot. Precipitation, this is melted snow and rain. Normal about 8.5, forecasting 7.8, and of course what everybody wants to know about, snowfall. I'm forecasting 16 inches. Normal is 14.6. If we see 16, it would be the most snow we've had here in a winter since 2014. Now, if you want to check this out online, we have a ton of information for you there. MyWabashValley.com, all of the charts, the graphs, the analog years, all of that stuff. You can check that out there as well. We'll see how we do as we head for another winter here in the Wabash Valley.